Our brains are like forests and the neural pathways are like paths. The more well-worn the path is, which is how we form habits, whether they're destructive or constructive. But that's also how we form addictions. That's how we form chaotic relationship patterns. Our brains are wired to survive. The way we survive is to create habits, and it's hard to break them. I taught myself to stay stoic and strong so that I could handle the shit. When my mom was drinking and chaos was happening, I removed my emotions from my body. I didn't let myself cry. I would get a phone call and be, like your mom has run off the road and she's in the hospital, and I wouldn't cry. That was a pattern. Instead of letting my emotions out, I was bulimic. I trained for marathons. I focused my energy on the external. I know I used running and training as a coping mechanism. I didn't realize it at the time, but when I would get upset or overwhelmed, I would go on a run. And it's not an unhealthy way to deal with emotions, but it wasn't crying. I had a really good early childhood. Things got a little weird starting around in middle school. My parents separated, and then they divorced. And really that was kind of the tipping point in my life. I see a very clear before and after. I always knew that my parents weren't like other parents. I never saw any affection. And when there were arguments, my mom would get really mad, and she was relentless. I mean, she was the kind of person that would bring up stuff, had nothing to do with the present. My dad would get really frustrated, and he would usually leave. He would leave the room, he would leave the house, he had to remove himself. My brother and sister listened to the answering machine, and there was a message from my aunt saying how sorry she was and about how she was there if my mom needed anything. And my brother and I just looked at each other like, what is happening? Because she had told us that he had gone camping. That was my mom's MO. Don't say the hard thing or do the hard thing, go around it. They told my brother and sister and I on New Year's Eve. My dad was like, I just thought it was the right thing because it was a fresh start. And then after that, my mom just fell apart. Her heart was broken and she didn't know what to do. She started drinking, and this was a woman I had never seen drink before. When my mom wasn't drinking, she was lovely. She was charming. She was a force. She was joyous. And I had her at one point in my life that way before the divorce. It was like a 180. It just overtook her. And after that moment, I was no longer thinking about what I wanted in life. I was thinking about how to save my mom. I had so much focus on her. I wasn't thinking about me. I started having bulimia in kind of a sick, twisted way. I was doing what my mom was doing, and it just manifested differently. It was self-destruction, bouts of bulimia, anorexia, just very disorganized eating, unhealthy patterns and habits like that. I had learned how to compartmentalize so well, and emotions were scary. And I didn't want to date anyone that I felt like I could get close to. I learned to kind of live in a state of what will happen next. Putting my heart on the line felt risky. I was watching my life from the outside in. I wasn't living my truth. Maybe I'm just one of those like disassociated people. Like maybe I have a borderline personality. I don't know. But during that time, I met my husband, and we hit it off. We really clicked. We were great friends. We moved in together, and it just kind of made sense. The wedding wasn't as much about my love for him and our union. It was more about what I thought I was supposed to be doing. And I'd been operating like that for so long, it didn't feel wrong. Getting pregnant with Grace was a gift for me in my relationship with my body, because I was nourishing her. Learning to love her taught me to love myself, because I was putting all these good things in my body for her and me. It's really one of the most pivotal points in my life. I loved being a mom. She's really the best thing that ever happened. Running has always been a way for me to cope. I would put Grace in a stroller. I even had a weather guard so that I could run in like bad weather. And I started running a lot. Before I knew it, I was training for marathons and running with a group of other women. It was during that time that I met someone that woke me up, like slapped me across the face and gave me feelings that I had never experienced before. That was it. That's what I had been missing. That's what I had been looking for. I did have an affair, knowing that it wasn't right. I chose to do this thing to this man that I did love because the feelings I had were so strong. How could they be wrong? I had to follow through to know. My coworkers at the time were like, "You're just so happy. It's so nice to see you so happy." It's a double-edged sword. I'm doing something destructive, but it was giving me such good feelings. I want to stay under the sun. It was hard to recognize the gravity of my choices until they caught up. My ex-husband found out and I had to come clean. He asked me things like, would you want to go to marriage counseling? Would you want to fix this? And I just, in my gut, in my heart, I knew no. It was scary. It was bringing up things that I experienced as a teenager in my body and not having a word for those things yet. At one point, I had a moment of, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. We have a really good life together. Like, what am I doing? And I took a couple steps back and I was like, maybe we can make it work. And within 24 hours, I was like, no, that poor man, I inflicted direct damage to his heart. Leaving a heterosexual marriage because I realized that I was gay is a pretty definitive end to that relationship. There's really no getting back together. It was never gonna work. There's a finality in that I think was helpful for us to move forward and continue to co-parent. It was a lot of change really fast. And so I kept running. I kept training for races and using that to really focus my energy. And I repressed a lot of the things that I was going through. Doing speed work on the track was one of my favorite things to do because I would run as fast as I could and try to go longer and longer and longer. And it was physically punishing in a way. It's not dissimilar to what I would do when I was bulimic. It just looked different. It was just this pattern of pushing and pushing and pushing. I started doing Pilates. It was mind-body connection. And one of the reasons it worked for me is it didn't require the spiritual meditative aspect that yoga did, because that made me very uncomfortable at that time in my life. Pilates was very much focus on your leg, focus on your arm, and I was able to be in my body and it didn't feel scary. I continued doing those things as I went through all these changes. And it did help me cope because it helped me survive. But it wasn't really getting to the core of the matter. The pattern of my coping for years had been self-destruction. So there was always something inside me that was saying, like, you're not enough. You're not lovable. You're not wanted. Pilates was a lot safer for me because I didn't need that like healing aspect. But then after my divorce, surprise, surprise, I did need it. So yoga for me became a place of healing. I would go to classes and breathe. It was my therapy. It was my recovery. At one point, I was taking a yoga class every night. I used it to heal my nervous system. Learning how to heal through breath and through movement has been key for me. I still have moments where I feel uncomfortable. I still have moments where I get upset or I get anxious. Triggers are such a hot topic right now, especially on social media. People can avoid them to the point where they stop growing. If you're constantly avoiding things that trigger you, how can you learn to be uncomfortable? How can you learn to sit with the emotions? Everything that is difficult is going to have an emotion connected to it. Some triggers are worth walking away from. Some triggers are just that. There's something that reminds you of something from your past, and you have to figure out what that is, and then confront the thing that was triggering and learn how to have a healthy relationship with it. Calming my body down helps me do the internal work I need to investigate and figure out what my pattern is or what my choices were or why. My mom was living a life of who she thought she was supposed to be, and then when it didn't work out, she didn't have anything to stand on because she didn't really know who she was. She put a lot of weight in how you are perceived. It was so important to her to be seen as a certain way. When I came out, my family was really supportive. It was only my mom who was like, "You sure it's not just a phase, honey? You could marry a rich man." It wasn't about me being myself or being happy or living my true life. One of my friends once told me that there's no better time to heal your relationship with your mother than when she dies. It's so true, because when she was alive, I had so much resentment. And resentment is essentially not getting what you want from someone else. And when she passed away, that just left, because there's nothing I can get from her anymore. When she was alive, there was a chaos cycle. I found myself in unhealthy relationships because that chaos cycle felt familiar and felt safe. I was so stuck in the trauma. I didn't know at the time how to get out of that feeling because that trauma never stopped. I'm able to also look back in an ownership way that when she was alive, it was like I couldn't do that. It was always because of my mom, because my mom is this, because my mom is that. And now that she is no longer here, it's my job. And it's actually been my job the whole time. But I didn't have space for that before. It wasn't until she died that I could really see her as a human who was just doing the best that they could with what they had. It's given me the gift of perspective. We're all human. We're all going through this wild ride called life. We've all been fucked up by something. I gotta do better. And I came out to people one at a time. And one of the questions was, were you raped? Was there sexual trauma? People say they're not judgmental, and then they judge you. It's sort of like the personality type that's, I'm the most open-minded person there is. And then they talk more, and you're like, wow, you're not at all. They have this caveat because they don't want the thing that they're going to say to actually be the thing that they're going to say, but it is. During all of my different relationships, even when they were at their worst, I never regretted coming out. Never. I have never thought I shouldn't have done that. Now, I have felt regret around my daughter. I have felt regret that she lost the childhood that she was used to. I have felt guilt because I changed the trajectory of her life. And that's a choice I had to make. I remember thinking, do I just hang on through her high school? Can I do that? But I knew I would be disconnected. I would distract myself. I'd probably be an Ironman competitor at this point. You'd probably never see me not in Lycra. I would be so into that one thing to survive. I wanted her to see bravery and strength. I wanted to give her what I didn't have from my mom. So I made the hard choice of disrupting that heteronormative relationship that from the outside in looked perfectly normal. To be real is scary, but I don't believe we're here to do it halfway. It doesn't matter whether you stay married, whether you get divorced. It doesn't matter whether you have more children, whether you are a stay-at-home mom, or whether you work a lot. You are always going to affect your children. It's the job. It's what parenting is. If I had stayed in that marriage, Grace would have experienced the kind of childhood that I did without seeing any affection. Quite likely, I would have repeated my mom's path and pattern because that's what I saw. Now she's 14. She was 5 when we first separated, and now it's just our life. And she's proud. She will introduce me as her gay mom. When I was going through like dating different people and everything, she was like, Mom, my friends think you're a player, and I think that's true too. What? But it's so funny that that's something that she's just like, yeah, that's cool. I'm like, I don't know if it's cool, but I've calmed it down quite a bit. Coming out later in life is interesting because I made a lot of decisions that I probably would have made in high school and in college if I had known what I wanted, but I didn't. So I had like superficial relationships with men that were not fulfilling and not satisfying, and I was unable to really connect with them. I had to learn those lessons in my 30s, which is less attractive than when you're a teenager. But I'm glad I did it. I had to. The other choice would be a choice driven by fear, worrying about how it will look. That's just not how I've lived my life. And I'm happy that I made the mistakes that I made. It gives her space to be herself also, and gives her a lot of freedom. There's a lot that's different about her life, but she sees both of her parents living their truths. Don't hide who you are from your children. They will figure it out, and they will learn that they can't be who they want to be. We truly model how to live to our children. Everything we do, they watch. There's a reason that when we go to therapy, we talk about our parents the whole time. Like, we learn what we see. If you continue down the path that you were parented, you're going to recycle the pattern. I want to break the cycle and break the pattern. That means doing a lot of things, unlike my mom and dad. If you have the self-awareness, then you have the responsibility to make the change. When I started dating women, honestly, it felt more natural. I didn't feel like I had to perform. I didn't feel like I was being objectified. I felt like an equal, and I felt safer. I wanted to have sex. When I was dating men, that was something that I would really try to avoid, or I'd have to be drunk. Not healthy. Dating women is more challenging. It's probably because it's fulfilling. I'm with what I need and what I want. And when I was dating men, that's not what I needed or wanted. So of course it felt easy. I could put up this wall and just go through the motions and do what I was supposed to do. My fiance's name is Oya. We met through friends, and we just became friends over time. And we knew something was there when we started yoga teacher training together. I figured it was a make or break kind of thing. Both of us will be out of our comfort zones. So we'll figure out pretty quickly whether or not we like each other in a long, healthy relationship way. I remember saying to her at one point when we weren't dating that I wasn't interested in dating just for fun anymore. I really wanted to have a fully conscious relationship where we are able to talk and communicate fully. So I saw her in a vulnerable state, and then she saw me in a vulnerable state when I was required to share feelings. There was one exercise we had to do, and I'm so glad she wasn't my partner for this. It was a staring into someone else's eyes exercise, and we had to hold the stare, I think for 10 minutes. I walked away from that exercise that was exhausting. And she walked away from that exercise thinking that was the most amazing thing. She's like, I want to do that with you. I was like, absolutely not. We're very different in very good ways. We've been dating for about a year, and we had talked about marriage. And it does seem fast, but also we're middle-aged women. We've both been married before, and 1 lesbian year is 7 in reality. Because women are so emotional, that's why connection goes so deep. It's a funny joke to make, but it also downplays how deeply connected 2 partners can be. I just feel like I've known her forever. For a long time, I thought I'd never get married again, but then I met her, and I just thought, this is the person I want to spend my life with, and I want to have a legal right to her as my person, to be able to visit her in the hospital, to be able to make decisions for this person. I want the same rights as everybody else. She gets along really well with my daughter, and being with her has always felt really easy. And even when it's hard, even when we have times where we butt heads, we are always able to come back and have a conversation, which is lovely. We're here to learn and grow, and there's no better way to do that than make mistakes.